3.0.1. In this session, we will walk through the process of importing and positioning a 3D model from an IFC file. Data sources. In this session, we will be transforming an IFC file into a Nextspace CAD tileset. As this process begins with a file import, it is also possible to start this process from the Entities menu. Import file. Click the Import File button. Browse for file. Use the File Browser dialog to find and open your IFC file. Proceed. The Proceed button will be displayed if the file you have uploaded meets Nextspace's requirements for importing as a tileset. Standards. If the file you have uploaded is a valid IFC Industry Foundation class file, then Nextspace expects it to match to a standard. If the IFC model content will be turned into Nextspace entities, it is usually best if objects in the IFC can be grouped together with Nextspace entities of the same type. In a normal workflow, it is best practice to fit your imported data to an existing standard or extend one if one already exists. Create new standard. To make training data more obvious, we will choose to create new standard. Name new standard. The name you give this standard will be visible in the entity types hierarchy, which we covered briefly in an earlier session. So it needs to be unique so that you can tell the difference between entities of this type and other entity types. We will give this standard a randomized name to prevent conflicts with existing entity types. Run import. Now that we have uploaded our file and set the IFC import options, we will now start the import of the file content into Bruce. Proceed. Click Proceed to move on to the next step. Inspect target schema. After a successful import, Nextspace summarizes the schema that it has used to classify the content imported from this file. Continue. Click Continue to move on to the next step in the import. Model origin. Model origin is a technical term that describes how we decide where to locate the model, its position, and how to turn it around, scale or tilt it, or orientation. Usually this is not something that we can reliably detect, so Nextspace asks for this information during import. Center of model. In this case, we will choose to use the geometric center, the place in the model where we were equally far away from all of the most distant objects in the model, for positioning and orientating the CAD tileset. If you are importing your own data, you might want to choose a pivot point that makes it easier to align multiple models for the same structure. For example, some common reference point rather than the center. Create tileset. Click Create tileset to complete the data import process. Positioning the tileset. You can think of a Nextspace CAD tileset as content that covers the whole world. For example, the 3D model you imported may contain building or network data in many locations or across vast distances. Be sure that Nextspace places that content from your model in a way that makes sense and aligns nicely with map layers. We will now provide Nextspace with the information it needs to do this. The options here are to manually position the tileset using an address or map coordinates, or to use information that you know is inside the file. If there is information about location and orientation in the file, then all we need to tell Nextspace is the EPSG code, which defines the system used to describe position and orientation, etc. Manually position. We will now manually position this tileset. Into location. We will expand the location helper to enter the coordinates. Alternatively, you can just type them, paste them directly into the import box as suggested by the placeholder text. View tileset. Click the View tileset button to display the new tileset details in the tilesets area of Nextspace Operator. Next steps. Correct the orientation. Although Nextspace has imported the content of the IFC file as Nextspace entities, we added a tileset of these entities and positioned the whole lot as we told it to. We know that the model we uploaded is not orientated how we want it to be. The reason this has happened in this demo is that we picked a sample IFC model and placed it in an arbitrary space. If the model was designed by an architect for a specific space, then it would probably be located and orientated correctly. We would not have to make the adjustments that we're about to do. Tileset URL. It is possible to use a tileset from another account by sharing the tileset URL. Generation tab. This tab displays the information about the entity structure on which this tileset is based. It also allows you to change the way in which the tileset is positioned and to regenerate the tileset if the entities have been changed by another process. Positioning tab. This tab displays the data used to position and orientate the tileset. The location portion of this data should be familiar from an earlier step in the session. Rotation. As mentioned earlier, we know that the model orientation needs to be adjusted for the location we have set so that it aligns nicely with its surroundings. For example, it faces the street. This data can be set precisely using this field, but we will do it interactively inside of Nextspace Navigator. Open a Navigator. We will now adjust the position and orientation of the CAD tileset interactively using the tools inside the Nextspace Navigator. Tileset modification. When modifying the tileset inside the Nextspace Navigator, you have several helper tools available. Here we can see the option to use the positioning tool or to change the rendering settings for the tileset. Positioning settings. Activating the Positioning Settings tool for a tileset also displays a positioning widget centered on the model origin specified for the tileset. We will use this widget to align the tileset manually. Activate 2D mode. We will switch to 2D mode so it is easier for us to see the alignment and rotation of the tileset relative to the map. Using the widget. The various rings and arrows of the positioning widget correspond to the way in which they change the position and orientation of the tileset. Using the color corresponding field in the positioning tool settings, you can change or tweak the adjustments that you make interactively by clicking and dragging a colored part of the widget. Change the position and save. As a guide, use the mouse to zoom out until you can see the model, the whole widget and some surroundings. Start with the blue ring of the widget to adjust the rotation of the model to align it with the road. In this session we covered importing an IFC model as a hierarchy of Nextspace entities, adding a tileset of the imported entities, positioning and orientating the tileset relative to the map. Note: importing and positioning a CAD tileset does not automatically mean that we will see it when browsing our project. You can think of the new CAD tileset like a map layer in the Map Picker tool. Until you have added a map layer, you cannot see it. For a CAD tileset, the simplest way to make it visible is to add a menu item to the project view to display the tileset. This is what we will do in the next session.